is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Okay, welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast. I am your host, George Grimm, and I'm here this evening with my friends Marc Weissman and Rich Isaak, and we're going to be talking about the Rangers' recent free agent signings. All right, gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Good to be here. Yep.
So, how do you think our Blueshirts did in the free agent spree?
Well, go ahead. You can go first.
Sure. I mean, I think overall they did pretty well, given the limitations with the salary cap. Ironically, the one guy I'm a little worried about is Jonathan Quick. Not because of his age, but because of his goaltending style. He's pretty aggressive, makes that first save, and really, at this point in his career, has to rely on his defenseman to clean up any rebounds.
Right.
Think a goalie from a few years ago who played for the Bruins, Tim Thomas. What made him so effective was he was very aggressive, made that first stop, but at that time the Bruins had defensemen that would clean up the rebounds.
Right.
It's not exactly the Rangers' strength. Please, go ahead.
That's a good point. You're right. I mean, as far as them, in their own, that's one of the areas the Rangers definitely struggled with was, in their own zone, especially on D at times. But, I mean, for one thing, well, I guess the first question is, given all what you just said, how would you compare, him versus Halak? Do you think it's an upgrade or a downgrade or about the same, or what do you think there?
I don't know that it's an upgrade. At one time in his career, absolutely, I would have said it was an upgrade. But, Halak is a traditional butterfly goalie. And I've got a little insight into it as my son was a goalie. And it's part of it is the style, right? A true butterfly goalie, they're blocking. Yes, it's good to be athletic, but if you're not terribly athletic anymore, it's good to be big.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And because you can't teach size and blocking off that net. And Quick was always a very athletic goalie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he's not a kid anymore.
No, that's for sure. Well, I guess if you're saying then it's okay, he's definitely not what he was. We all agree on
Correct.
That. Which is why we're paying him what we're paying him. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, but if you say, let's say he's as good or, in the same ballpark as Halak, and when I say Halak, I'm talking Halak in like the second half of the year, obviously, when he played really well.
Right.
Okay, so you say, even if you say that's a wash, but then you've got the whole, one of them has 3 cups and the other one doesn't. So
absolutely.
I think that's I don't want to overweigh that, because you still have to, and the other thing is Quick is the backup. If we were signing him as our starter, I would say, that could be a problem or more of a problem. But I guess the other thing is, to your point, if he's really aggressive, let's say he's a lot more aggressive than Igor, relatively speaking, that can be a major adjustment for everybody on the team, forwards and defensemen. You know what I mean? Rarely, I guess, do you have two goalies on the same team who have identical styles. But but depending on the contrast between the two of them, Igor can be pretty aggressive. Obviously, though, he's younger and quicker. No pun intended. He's he can come out and make a save and then recover a lot faster probably than Quick can at his age.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, like guys like Trouba and Miller and those kinds of guys are used to, looking to their right, and their goalie is, almost in the slot at times, as opposed to somebody like Hank, who used to stay in the crease pretty much most of his career. Even when Hank, got older, I always thought it was interesting. He never really modified his style to come out more. He pretty much, and he did okay pretty much, right to the end. So I think if you look at that, if you say, okay, we're not getting the Jonathan Quick of, the 2000s, but we are getting, or 2100s, and we are getting, a decent backup, but then you have all of that. You may not even see it during the regular season, but, once the playoffs come around, I'm sure you got to think that when the pressure's on, or when there's game situations, or when between periods, or whatever it is, you never know what's going to click that Quick has been through, that he just has to, nudge Igor and say, hey, this is probably going to happen next period. I've seen it before. We saw in the finals against whoever. I won't mention any names. And, you know what I mean? And, that kind of thing. So
absolutely.
I if he was a downgrade, if you're saying, okay, we're getting a guy with all these experience, but his game has suffered, that'd be a different story. But I think it's, for a backup and for the role he's expected to play, that being equal, and then to have all that experience, championship experience, I think it's a good thing.
It's a good
Again,
thing.
I think, while I said he's the one I'm concerned about, yes, he can help Igor with the mental side of the game, absolutely, in the high-pressure situations. He's been through it. He's lived through it and come out the other side with success. So, absolutely. The other thing we haven't discussed is, with the new coach, they should be playing a far more structured game.
Totally agree. I've been thinking that from the very beginning. Absolutely.
So that is a help for a guy like Quick. Obviously a help for a guy like Igor too, but since we happen to be talking about Quick. But anyway.
Yeah, I think about, some. Go ahead, George, you wanted to say something?
No, it was a good point.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking when you said that, because I have been thinking about, the Laviolette effect and what that's going to have on, even if the exact same roster came back, how it would change. I think that structure that you're talking about is going to help guys like, Miller, just signed his bridge deal, but there's still a lot of concerns from a lot of people about, him defensively. Offensively, I think there's no concerns, really. So you have somebody like him. We've talked about Panarin a lot, with the playoffs and even during the regular season. I could see guys like that sort of shoring up their games under Laviolette. I don't know why. Maybe that's wishful thinking on my part. But I just feel like, that's going to become, they're going to be able to play their own game the way they, use their strengths, but just be a little more cognizant and a little less high risk, in the case of Panarin's case, under Laviolette. And I think that's going to help the goalies. It's going to help other, defense pairings and all that. So I think, and some of these other free agents that they sign, there's a lot of bottom six sort of defensive-oriented guys that either they're going to make the team, which means they're good enough to make the team, or they're going to push other guys to beat them to then, be a third line center, a fourth line center, and which means, it's better from that standpoint. So.
Right. Okay. What about Wheeler? What do you think he fits in?
I'll go first if that's okay, Rich.
Absolutely.
Well, I think he's a right winger, and he's a solid right winger. So I mean, I think off the bat, it's not unreasonable to assume that he's going to be in the top six on the right side.
Right.
I've seen all kinds of permutations from not just fans, but reporters, and about who is he going to play with. It all depends. A lot of it depends on what's going to happen with Lafreniere, I think, in some cases, where he's going to slot. Kako obviously is probably a top right wing, but whether he's on the top line or the second line, let's say, is still up for debate. So I think there's still some, that's the exact mix and the exact lineup is going to probably have to shake out during training camp with Wheeler, as well as the rest of the roster. But I guess the thing that I like about him is he's big. Okay, he's not just a right winger. He had what, like 7? I looked at his stats, 7 consecutive 20-goal seasons with Winnipeg. So he's not going to blow your doors off necessarily. Although I can't think off the top of my head. Maybe he has he played? Let's say he plays with Panarin. Now I know they both can at times be now both a pass first type of player, but if Wheeler gets into more scoring mode, maybe his numbers go up just from playing with Fred. So that could happen, because that's you look at stats of players who we signed and traded for, and you think about well, whatever they did is one thing, but a lot of it depends on who they played with. So I could see Wheeler, but he adds that just big size. If he could be a 20 or even a 30 goal scorer, and go in front, get some dirty goals and that kind of thing, and just kind of be tough in their face. Especially, that's a playoff kind of player you want, really. And other than his age, the only other, he was captain for like 7 years also in Winnipeg. Although I was reading more about, I guess, what happened when they took his captaincy away, which apparently happened because he requested to be traded out of Winnipeg. But his quote, if I could, George, I actually thought this was a really interesting quote from him, if I could read it.
Sure.
Yeah. It said, sort of, some of it's sort of stock answer, I don't need a letter on my jersey, what he said. There's a time in my career when he needed that. It was validation. I don't need that anymore. I'm really looking forward to watching the guys, the Winnipeg guys at the time that I watched grow up and step into an expanded role. If you think this is because of this, I'm just going to fade in the background and not be a leader on this team, you're sorely mistaken. That's like, man. And they still traded him, but I think maybe that had a lot to do with bonus. I guess he took a poll in the locker room or something, and a lot of the guys had moved past him being Wheeler being captain. But I don't know. I kind of read that. It seemed very it wasn't like a sort of a politically correct way of putting things. I thought it was really kind of a bold statement to describe himself, which I thought was cool. So you get that, plus a guy who's big, and he's been an all-star. He was nominated for the Messier Award. He's got a lot of things going for him. So I really like, I like what he brings and where he can play.
I thought that signing was a good one.
Yeah.
For all the reasons you outlined.
Yeah. He was pretty cheap too, so that's good.
He's what?
He's pretty cheap.
Right. Exactly. That's true. You're right. To get all this, to get everything that I just talked about for that amount of money is pretty good. Any potential knocks that you see, Rich? Like anything you're concerned about with him?
No, the only question is foot speed, because the Rangers have gone from at one point being a very fast team. They're not a very fast team anymore. The younger guys they have, none of them are speed burners.
Right.
So that's the only concern. But by the same token, they didn't have just fast skaters when Alain Vigneault was the head coach. They moved the puck quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have good structure in the defensive end, it's easier to get out of your own end quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So time will tell. No, I thought that was a good signing. The fact that with his age, he's on an over 35 1-year contract like Quick, with performance bonuses, and the performance bonuses aren't onerous at all. No, I thought that was a great signing, actually, given what budget Drury had. No,
you're right. Actually, I would call that a good signing, even if he didn't have any. But I mean, better, in a way, it was a little bit. It was almost like it's almost like what happened with when the salary cap came in. It prevented teams like us really, and say that back in the Sather days of
absolutely.
We have the most money, so we're going to get what we consider the best players, which didn't always work. But
if you recall, when Sather was still running the show in Edmonton, he infamously said, if I had New York's budget, I'd win the cup every year. Well, then he came to New York and had the budget and won nothing. So
he didn't even make the playoffs the first 5 or 6 years. He didn't even make the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not how much.
Yeah.
It's not. Yes, I agree with you, Mark. The salary cap forced a guy like Sather to have some discipline. Anyway.
Yeah. What I'm saying here is just that I think Wheeler, for what you're getting for the money is a good deal, regardless if that was all the money Chris had to spend or not. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's just a very not even cost effective, just a very prudent signing. It's just like, here's a guy who could potentially bring a lot in a lot of different areas that this team is lacking. You don't have to spend a lot of money for it. I mean, that just sounds like, like if they had more money, then they would just go after other players. But at least in this case, they would get him hopefully anyway, kind of thing, what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And in fact, in reality, you could make a case that Wheeler would have been a good signing at twice the money.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So, anyway.
Okay.
As far as some of the other guys, forwards, Bonino, Pitlick, these are basically fourth-line guys, and they play that role very well. And Bonino, after my comment about speed, despite being 35, he's not slow. He's still pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he'll be perfect as that fourth-line center.
Yeah, he's about the same age as McTavish was when we got him. He would be like a quicker McTavish with face-offs and fourth-line center, and just a smart player. I mean, plus, he also has cup experience, 2 cups and stuff.
Yep.
The combination of Wheeler, Quick, and Bonino actually sounds like a law firm. But
You're right. Good call, Jim. That's right. Well, the other sort of amusing thing when you look at this, Chris Drury grew up in Trumbull, won a cup, and now he's got Quick grew up right near me, actually, in Milford, Connecticut, went to Hamden High School, went to Avon Old Farms Prep School, which is the same prep school that Leach went to, and also
Leach went to. Yep.
And then Bonino grew up in Farmington, Connecticut, so it's like, it's one thing to be like, a lot of times an American-born GM or coach will bring American-born, players, like that sometimes happens, but this is like, a Connecticut fest, with your GM being from the area. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. They just, for whatever reason, they might know more about them, or they know about the programs. I mean, I know all of that was way before their NHL career. These guys have been in the league for a long time, but you just never know. It's like, if you were really close with somebody in high school, you could have 30 years go by and you might feel like, no time has passed, kind of thing.
And remember, when Quick was growing up, his favorite player was Mike Richter.
Mike Richter. Oh, speaking of which, I actually read a very interesting nugget about that. Jonathan Quick is now the all-time leader in shutouts for American goalies. And guess who he passed to achieve that.
I would assume Mike Richter.
It was. I didn't know Richter was the all-time American shutout leader before that. I had no idea. This was up until last year. This only happened last year. And the other ironic thing is Quick is now second all-time in American wins, and he just passed John Van Beesbrook.
Wow.
So you've got, two former Rangers having been passed by Quick in two different categories. I thought that was pretty wild.
Yep. So let's see. On defense, them signing Gustafson, that was a no-brainer. That was insurance. A guy with NHL experience, has played for Laviolette before. He'll be a perfect left side defenseman to play with Schneider.
Yeah. Now I have a question. We talked about this, I think, on the last show.
Yeah.
Because before the signing, we were kind of pegging Jones to be that sixth defenseman. Do you think it's a given that Gustafson is already, in the sixth slot and Jones will be like a seventh guy, or what do you think?
I think Jones will either be the number 7 guy, but will get some games. They'll definitely give him a look.
Okay.
From what I understand, he really worked on his defensive game last year to try and improve in his own zone. Because let's face it, he's like Fox. He's not a big guy.
Right,
but
exactly.
Fox is so good positionally.
Exactly.
Right.
That the size doesn't really enter into it. And from what we saw, especially in the playoffs, Fox, despite not being a 6'1", 6'2" guy, he's quite strong.
Oh yeah. I think he has to. If he's going to be sort of elite long term, Fox. I think you've got to add that. I mean, the same thing happened with Leach. I mean, he was pretty much an offensive. He was solid, obviously, but he got more physical and more aggressive defensively and things like that as his career. I mean, either on his own or because he got a lot of crap from it. People would just call him like just an offensive juggernaut.
Well,
who could, and that was not true, obviously, but definitely. I mean, he's back when you could throw hip checks without getting called for a penalty. Leach was doing that all the time. So he definitely added. I think it was underestimated, and I thought about too with Jones, like he, like you said, he really can't. He's not in a position really to be physical. I don't think. I mean, anything's center of gravity. You never know, but yeah, he needs to. I saw him play. I went to one of the Wolfpack games last year, and he had 2 pretty egregious giveaways during the game. I remember thinking there was only a few guys that I knew, from having played for the Rangers. And I was thinking, wow, because I remember liking, when he played for us, he seemed pretty solid. And I figured, well, he must be kicking butt down there. And he was still kind of struggling, with that part of the game. So.
Yep. Okay, where do guys like Tyler Pitlick and Riley Nash, who are both centers, fit in?
I think Nash is going to play in the minors again like he did last season.
Okay.
He didn't get a sniff in the NHL last season.
Yeah.
Because I looked at that earlier, and he's a third, fourth line guy. He's insurance policy. The last time he had really what you would call a full season in the NHL was 1920 with Columbus. Had 64 games, 14 points total. He's a plugger.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think if we didn't sign Bonino, he might be the guy that we're talking about for that, fourth line. So, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know if he's not as good, I don't think, and doesn't have the pedigree, I guess. But I was reading some things about him. Well, first of all, I know Riley Nash. He went to Cornell in the 2000s, and I remember watching him there. And he actually played with Colin Greening. They were on a line together, and and then I remember him. Then it's sort of like I don't remember a lot about him until he played, certain games with Carolina. But when he played for Boston, he actually played with Dominic Moore in Boston. I was reading that.
Yep.
And Bergeron got hurt, and he was on the top line with Marchand. So it's again, a lot of time has passed since all that's happened. But the fact
his best year in Boston, he only had 15 goals.
Yeah.
41 points. That's probably, if I say, that was the year Bergeron got hurt. Well, that could be every season the last 8 years.
Yeah, that's right. He also had a pretty bad injury. I guess Torrey Krug took a shot and cut it. He got a cut on his ear. He got like 40 stitches or something like that. So he's played. If you look at, there's like a theme. A lot of these guys were getting. This is Nash's 8th team with the Rangers, and some of the other guys played seven. I think Benino's played for 7 teams. So that's, you can look at that as lots of experience, or they can't stick around. So it depends how you look at it.
I would say that a lot of these guys are just classic, bottom of the lineup guys.
Right.
They're the guys you get in a transaction because you need a body to plug in.
Right.
They're not terribly expensive. I mean, there's no risk in having Nash as an insurance policy.
Right.
He's bigger than Lecision. He's got far more NHL experience than Brzezinski. So, yeah, again, an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
I got to think Ben Harper winds up in Hartford or on somebody else's team.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Unless they decide to trade Jones. I mean, that's a possibility, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be realistic. They may have signed him specifically so they get something back for him, because now he's on a contract where he signed for, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's got cost certainty for this season and next, so that could be for that too.
He probably has more of an upside than Harper, so the Rangers would be able to sell that to another team and get more for him,
Right, it's kind of a double-edged sword. He has more of an upside, so we should keep him, but he has more of an upside. His value just trade is higher. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if it were 3 years ago, I'd say absolutely, but, we're in Mr. Dolan has demanded go for it mode.
Gee, what a surprise.
Wow. Somebody's whispering sweet nothings in his ear.
Yeah, we all know who that is. Yeah, the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So how about the kid? Where does this leave Will Cooley and Brennan Hoffman? Where does it leave those guys?
Well, I think Ottman, unless he blows their socks off in training camp, is starting in Hartford. Simply because to get him reps, the last thing you want with a kid is him sitting in the press box.
Right.
Cooley last year started slowly, but really came on as the season went on and had an outstanding playoff run for Hartford. So
mm-hmm.
He's the guy who I think might have a chance of making the team out of training camp. It's not that I have my doubts on Ottman, because I think Ottman eventually will be on the NHL squad. A lot of these signings were one-year signings. Forget about the two or three over 35 guys for a moment. The rest of them are one-year signings because that's how long the Rangers need them for.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're hoping Cooley, Othman, and I don't know who else. Maybe this kid Sakura, who he's only 18.
Yeah.
But he's got a motor.
Yeah, he looked good in those clips from prospect camp for sure.
Yeah. And he looked good playing for them for Hartford at the end of the season last year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's a young kid, but he's been playing in the pro league in Slovakia. So he's been playing against men. Okay, they're not NHL caliber, and it's a bigger rink, but
yeah,
still.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. You were talking about the length of the deals, and you know, that as much as all this talk about win, you know, we're in win now mode and things like that, and that's, you know, that's where all these sort of veteran signings are coming from. You know, your point makes them look a little more prudent than just that. It's like, you know, yes, we get these guys that we know theoretically are only going to be here for a year, and maybe they could be the missing piece of the puzzle, you know, to have a good run. But at the same time, it allows us to, it doesn't you know, if Hoffman played really well in camp and you didn't have some of those veterans, you'd be like, well, we might as well plug him in at, you know, second right wing because there's nobody, you know, there's no Wheeler there who can play for us. So now it's like, okay, we can kind of do the right thing and let him work on, you know, get used to playing with professionals and all that. And you know, and bring them up the way you kind of the way, you know, some of the other young guys probably, you know, should have been brought up and weren't. So
absolutely.
What about Lafreniere? He hasn't signed yet, has he?
No, he has not. No.
Okay. All right. I thought they were going to trade him at the draft. I fully expected them to trade him to move up in the draft, but it didn't happen. But
to be honest, the way he's played, and some of that is the way he's been used as well. I don't think they could get a first rounder for him right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Certainly not higher in the draft than they were picking.
No.
You know, I mean, I just think that his value has fallen dramatically. Yes, some of it is on him, but it's also how he's been used.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Let's not lose sight of the fact that, you know, it's taken Hedl, 5 years to get to this point.
Exactly.
Right? And my comment about Hedl is always, he's on the same timeline that Zibanejad was on in his career.
Yeah.
And Ottawa got into win now mode. They traded him to acquire Derek Big Game Brassard.
Right.
And for a year or two, he played very well for Ottawa. He played with them last season again after stops in multiple other places. But, you know, he's at the end of his career. It doesn't pay to give up on a young, talented guy too soon.
No.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think there's a couple things. You're right. It's what he would be worth right now, even regardless of where he was drafted or anything like that. You just look at his play by itself and, you know, what he could get you. But then you look at, okay, so that's one reason why I don't think you would trade him. The other reason is, like you just said, I mean, it's still too early. It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of a lot like the rest of the team that's been through two coaches now. You know, this is going to be the third coach for Lafreniere, and it's going to kind of be, you know, okay. I mean, after a while, you know, how many times can you blame different coaches for your own play? You know, and in a way, it's really not the coach's fault that we have Kreider and Aaron on left wing. I mean, that's you know, that's really that's actually a good thing, right? When you look at it that way, it's a good thing. But it's just a frustrating thing when you have somebody, when you don't have, like, if we had a third line center and a third line right winger that were almost as good as your second line, then it wouldn't matter. But there's a pretty significant drop off from second to third line as far as scoring and time on ice and all this other stuff. You know, so I think Lafreniere doesn't have the benefit of playing, you know, and then the power play as well. He doesn't play as much. Hopefully, maybe he'll play more this year. But I think you really have to see, like with everybody else, you got to see how he does under Laviolette, and People still throw out the idea of him playing right wing, switching over. I don't see that happening. I think I guess it could happen. I guess if you really want, they really want to put him in the top 6, but I don't see that happening right now.
I think, as you mentioned earlier, Wheeler is going to be one of your top 6 right wings. Kakko is going to be the other one.
Right.
Which leaves Lafreniere to be the third line left wing. And the question is, who's the center going to be?
Right.
Is it going to be Hedl, or are they going to push Hedl into the number 2 center role and make Trocheck the third line center?
That's what I would do. And not only that, I would take it one step further, just not permanently, not in stone, but the idea of Kreider playing with Trocheck and VC, let's say, on the third line, and putting Lafreniere on the left wing and Kakko on the right of Zibanejad, I wouldn't say no to that. I'm not saying that's the answer, but that would not. The only thing that's ever bothered me about that proposal, and it's probably unfounded, is the fact that now you're paying a third line left wing $6.5 million. But whether that matters to people, I don't know. It always pops into my head when I think about it. But if you put that aside and just talk about on ice, best fit, where these guys could play, I think Kreider and Trocheck, they played really well at times together. So
they played very well together last season.
Yeah.
Kreider's going to get his goals in the power play. That's not going to change. I think it would do Lafreniere well to play with Zibanejad. And for that matter, what about a lineup where you have Zibanejad with Lafreniere and Wheeler?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And then you have Panarin with Hedl and Kakko.
Yeah.
And you've got Kakko and Hedl who've played together.
Yeah.
So, the right wing would work.
Yeah, and Hedl and Brett have clicked together when they play. We were just watching today. They showed the Ranger Devil game from earlier in the year when Hedl got the overtime goal. I mean, it's like, and they played together more than just that game. But yeah, that's a really good one because you've got sort of like cross-pollination familiarity. One side of the center and your right wing have played together, and then the center and the different left wing. So the only guys that really didn't play together very much are Kakko and Brett. But with Hedl being in the middle, that would sort of transition that whole line basically.
Yep. And again, I come back to it as far as Lafreniere goes. Let's all not forget, because of COVID, he missed his entire final season of junior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he played in a delayed World Junior tournament. They won the gold. He was one of the best players that year for Canada in the World Juniors. And then he had to jump right to the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't going to start the number 1 overall pick in Hartford.
Right.
Okay.
What do you think about his foot speed? I mean, that's the knock on him sometimes is his skating. What do you think about that?
Well, he needs a center who can carry the puck. He needs to play with people who can carry the puck. And if Laviolette's game is to move the puck quickly via passes, he'll have time to get in there.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking more like on the forecheck, like you've got, let's say he was playing with on the third line, and you have the center and him sort of coming in and being able to get in on the defenseman, but then also if the puck gets past him, get back, that kind of thing.
I'm less worried about him forechecking than I am about him coming back defensively should the puck escape the zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's coming back that I worry about foot speed.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is when you're a winger, you don't have to come back as far, which is nice, as opposed to being a center, so you just have to get back to the blue line. But yeah, I don't think necessarily, it's not really a detriment. As I think it's just compared to others, it's like a relative thing. I think maybe he's just, that's not one of his. I wouldn't call it one of his strengths, but he's got great hands. He had several deflection goals last year. He had, obviously, some of those insane move goals last year.
He's got tons of skill.
Yeah.
Again, he needs a little time and space, and depending on who he plays with, he'll get it.
Exactly.
And again, him with Wheeler's a big guy. Wheeler will make some space for him. Zibanejad's speed will make some space for him.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyway,
right.
It's just a matter of I think it's not a question of will they sign him. I think it's just how much it's going to cost, and maybe that's the holdup. That Lafreniere and his agent are holding out, want more money than Drury wants to give them.
Right.
Do you think that's legitimate? Sorry, George. Do you think that's? I mean, on what basis could he hold out for unlimited?
Well, the question is, I don't know how much he's asked for, and I don't know how much has been offered. But what else would be holding this up?
Yeah, that's true. Unless he's asking for term, and if he asks for term, he's not going to be signing for big money. They don't have it anyway. Right, that's right.
Yeah. Or a no move contract. Might be looking for that.
Right.
And they don't want to do it anymore.
Think about Igor for a moment, guys, okay? It's not that he got signed for chump change, but, 5 points in round numbers, $5.7 million for what was it, 3 or 4 years. It's, it's for a guy of his caliber, he's won the Vezina.
Yeah.
So, time to bet on yourself is how I would describe it.
Yeah. I didn't actually realize that when Quick re-upped with LA, he signed a 10-year contract that just expired last year. I forgot. I mean, I kind of remember that but until I saw it again, I was like, oh my God.
That was that was during the cap era, but before they put the limit on a cap of a re-sign of 8 years.
Okay.
That was the previous CBA.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, here's what I'm afraid of, guys. I'm afraid that somewhere through the season, they're going to try to jam Patrick Kane down our throats again. What do you think about that? I think it would be an awful thing, but and I don't see where he would fit in. But that doesn't seem to matter sometimes to these people. So the
question will be how much cap space is left, and how little would he be willing to sign for the remainder of the season?
Right.
Right. I think at the moment, without Lafreniere signed, Cap Friendly says they currently have about $2.3 million projected cap space, and Puckpedia says they have a little over $3 million, but you still got to sign Lafreniere, and you got to think he's going to come in around $2 million.
Right. So how is the only way that's even an option? I think I've heard, where you only use Kane for the playoffs, where there is no cap. I mean, isn't that the only? Because I agree with you. There's really not going to be much left for anybody after they sign Lafreniere.
Pretty much. You risk screwing up the team's chemistry like you did this year.
Exactly.
Well, what screwed them up was we say the chemistry, but really think about it. If he was Patrick Kane from 3 seasons ago, he wouldn't have been as big a detriment to the team. The problem was he was so beat up he just couldn't go.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? He had that one game towards the end of the season that he looked like his old self, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And so.
What about Tarasenko? What do you think Tarasenko?
Anyway, you know, so I just don't trust him. But do
you think Tarasenko's in the mix at all, George?
As I told someone the other day, I've been watching this team for more than 60 years now, and they have never called me up to ask me what to do. So
that makes two of us, George.
You haven't called George up either? Is that what you're saying?
No, they haven't called me, and I've been watching this team for 60 years.
I know. I was just kidding.
Since this February, it was 60 years.
Yeah.
Since I went to the first game at the old Garden.
Well, thank you, guys. You guys are making me feel nice and young.
Yeah, you're a kid, Mark.
Yeah. It's only been 54 years for me or whatever.
Yeah. Mark, how bad am I? I learned to skate at Iceland in the old Garden.
Oh, really?
The old practice rink, yeah.
Wow.
George and I have talked about this. When I see those old photographs from the practice rink, I see the windows at the 8th Avenue end of the Garden in those photos, and it reminds me of being there as a 10-year-old kid with the sun streaming in through those windows during the daytime.
Yeah.
That's cool.
East, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
Anyway.
I thank you very much. We're running out of time here, as usual. I thank you very much for coming on. This was a great podcast. We had a great conversation. And I hope we can do it again real soon. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Yep.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been the Retro Rangers podcast with George Grimm, Marc Weissman, and Rich Isaak. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you for another good conversation.
It felt even smoother than last time, I thought. It was like kind of know each other's styles and stuff.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Did George hang up?
Apparently.
I guess he was like, I thought maybe he just hit stop on the recording.
That's what I thought he'd done.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Well, have a good evening.
Yeah, thanks. This is
Take
great.
care. We'll no doubt talk next time.
Absolutely. Take it easy.
Take care.
Bye.
The proceeding has been a comfortably zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.